So we all are aware of uh, input, uh, process, and then output, and then feedback. Input, process, output, feedback. And then we have TE input, TI process, FE output, and then FI feedback. And then goes like this, goes like this, goes like this, goes like this, and then it goes, basically. That's the loop. That is the process in terms of how information flows through our decision-making cognitive functions. Now, this is necessary because when you're looking at TE input specifically, one of the problems that you have with it is that what if you have question marks here? Because if you have question marks here, you will automatically have question marks here. Why is that? Think about it this way. So you have like a ground floor, right? Actually, that's a horrible ground floor. We're going to use like green. How about that? So you have a ground floor, and then you have a tower, okay? Little knowledge tower. Yes, I'm aware it looks like an obelisk. You don't have to say what else it looks like, please. We have ourselves a nice little, TE foundation, a nice little foundation, okay? And we'll call this extrovert thinking, right? Awesome, fair enough. But then, over time, it gets added in a direct logical order, logos, right? Going all the way up. And then you have logos, 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 then you have logos, and you have logos, okay? And then at the top you have, oops, that is not accurate. At the top you have your output, which is the FE, okay? And then you have the logos, which is the TI logos. All right. So using an example from ancient times, we have something known as the Tower of Babel. So so here we go. This is the metaphysical symbol of the Tower of Babel, okay? Metaphysically speaking, symbologically speaking, we have the Tower of Babel right here, which is all of the collective knowledge of man in one place. What was the Tower of Babel? What was it, you ask? Well, it is a library, okay? It is a library. So when we're looking at cognition, the Tower of Babel actually exists within mankind, within each human being, but it is most symbolized or contained within TI users, because TI users are all about logos. Now, if anyone here played Jenga before, so in Jenga, it's that game where you have a tower of wooden bricks, and then you pull out one of the wooden bricks and put it on the top of the tower to build the tower to see how high you get the tower before it finally topples over, etc. The game of Jenga is literally exactly how introverted thinking works. I could not find a better physical manifestation of logic or logos or introverted thinking other than like the game of Jenga, right? So I'm going to put a little note over here. So I'm going to show you how this ties into the concept of Occam's razor. So when you have logos, and I'm going to talk about why the why behind Occam's razor, and we talk about the what behind Occam's razor, and then the how. But in order to get there, I got to explain the Tower of Babel, the internal Tower of Babel, from a cognition standpoint with human beings initially. So what's wrong with this tower? Well, like, what really is wrong with this tower? Because in order for logic to work, logic is just something where, you call like leaps of logic, right? You hear everyone's like, well, that's a really big leap of logic, right? A leap of logic. So leaps. And each leap is also known as a level, right? A level of logic. And each level is representing every single one of these, we'll say, floors within this tower. All these floors represent levels of logic, right? I just realized that we can't even see some of the things that we've said here, so let me adjust the camera appropriately. Okay, cool. So taking myself out of the picture now, just focusing straight on the whiteboard. So, okay. So these are levels within the Tower of Babel. These are levels of logic, etc. And when a TI user is specifically thinking, when they're thinking about, when they're making a decision, or when they're making leaps of logic, or when they're processing information for decision making, it's always, they have this knowledge tower within their souls, basically, that they're constantly building upon. And guess who has the biggest tower? Well, it's pretty obvious, but TI Hero, it's got the biggest one. And then also, obviously, there's TI Parents as well. So that's pretty great. They got a big tower, big tower. The problem is what happens when you have a big tower of logic inside of your soul? Well, guess what? It's top heavy sometimes. It gets top heavy because, especially as you're trying to play the game of Jenga, and this is what happens. So like if you're looking at, let's use a black version here. So wow, that's like a really terrible example of a tower. But within this tower, you have all these different levels, and you're pulling in one level to bring it to the top, and bring in another level to bring it to the top, and then bring in another level to go over here. And we're going to another one here, and then another one here, etc. As you are removing pieces from within the tower, etc. Right? This is literally how the tower works. You're trying to build off of itself. This is exactly what happens to introverted thinking. This is exactly what happens to introverted thinking. And don't worry, we're going to get to extroverted thinking. I just got to lay the foundation of the introverted thinking first before we talk about extroverted thinking. So Occam's razor, when you're looking at it this way, when there's an introverted thinker and they don't have a source of, I can use the rainbow color for this, when they are lacking a source of input, and what is a lack of source of input? Think about it this way. You ever hear of an echo chamber? An echo chamber is basically when a human being is put in a group that all thinks the same. There's no, and then like there's a majority opinion or a majority school of thought present within that group of people, right? This is, this has been a problem probably for, I don't know, forever when it comes to human beings. But it really stems from, okay, hey, why, like, it's funny. Well, let me just make a leap of logic here. And here's an anecdote. Within my life, there have been times, like if I join a certain Discord server, that Discord server has a certain way of thinking. It has a certain principle about it, or has a certain group think about it, or it has a certain few accepted ideas. It has a certain culture, right? It's no different from a church or an organization or a business. There's always a dominant culture. There's always a dominant school of thought, right? And this is consistent throughout any people group within forever, basically, in all of mankind and mankind's history. This is a normal thing because of the lack of school of thought, right? Okay, so based on that, when you're lacking in that school of thought, you are in this echo chamber with this group of people. But so what that means is that you end up getting the same input. If you're a TI user and you're in that group, you're hearing the same thing from multiple people, which means you're likely to provide the same kind of output, which then just feeds that same group of people. It feeds that same echo chamber. and it actually doesn't allow for diversity within the echo chamber, and it could actually you can end up following the conclusion logically to the purpose of the echo chamber and what it will be like. This is why a lot of uh, when white males to get together and have groups on Discord or on Reddit, they call them white male echo chambers, white supremacist echo chambers, and then people are labeled that way just to say, just by default, regardless of what their belief systems are, right? And this can be a consistent issue. I've seen multiple people become victims of that. I've seen a few of my friends become victims of that, but it's not exactly accurate. What the thing is because if you're in a people group, it's really necessary to have minorities present, minorities being psychological minorities in terms of their type, but also minorities based on their opinions, minorities based on their forms of logic, minorities based on their functions. You don't want to have a group of just NTPs. You don't want to have a group of just STPs or SPs. You don't want to have an overarching temperament within your organization, within your school. You don't want to have a dominant amount of certain cognitive functions, etc. I actually looked at the demographics of CSJ as a company recently, and I really recognize that there's almost nobody direct in the company and everyone's indirect. Everyone's informative. That's like really hard to run a company when you're like, when that's happening. You know what I mean? Like that's hard. That sucks when they're all informative, right? You got to be aware of these things. You don't want to create an echo chamber, and that's the first problem that you're looking at when it comes to dealing with logic. Because if you have the wrong input, or if you have the same input, you're always going to get the same output. So according to this whiteboard, what does that mean? So look at it this way. What happens when you have same input, right? Well, the foundation is the same, and that means likely where you're going to end up having the same output up here. That's not appropriate. So when you have the same input, if you have the same foundation, the roof or the output is basically going to be the same. And then you end up going to getting a feedback that, everyone's like, oh, yeah, everyone's opinion of the roof is good. Okay, yeah, I feel the roof's good. Each individual's there. And then they end up having that opinion of input, right? Because remember, TE input is opinion, okay? And then it ends up trying to put it forth in the process. So what does this mean? Same input, potentially you're going to get the same outputs in an echo chamber. And an echo chamber is all about the same input. But what happens when you remove input entirely? What happens when there is no echo chamber? What happens when it's just completely gone, and then all of this is basically going away and there is no input anymore? What happens? Well, it's basically like having your input frozen in time, basically. So then it becomes this. It becomes how do I say it? It becomes last known input, right? And this is really frustrating. This is especially frustrating to TE users when it comes to arguing with the TI user or having a relationship with the TI user, because the last known input basically becomes the source of truth, or the source of which the logic or the decision making has been made. It is the foundation. It basically means the foundation is getting old, it is rotting, it needs to be renewed, because it's like, oh, you've either closed yourself off from certain opinions that you think is true, or you are refusing to add to your own personal diversity of opinion from other external sources. And because of this, you've allowed your thinking to be completely flawed. You've allowed your logic to be completely flawed in the process, right? This is a serious issue. This is a problem. This is what frustrates TE users the most about TI users, because no wonder TE users ask, hey, I need you to cite your sources. The reason why is because the TE user is checking to make sure if the TI user has considered other opinions, or if they're in an echo chamber, if the TI user is allowing the echo chamber of their overarching culture to provide that foundation of TE input within their knowledge tower, within their soul, their own personal Tower of Babel, etc. Because remember, when you're looking at leaps of logic or level, according to the whiteboard here, each logic, it's like this. Remember, logic is if this, then that. So level 1. If level 1 is true, level 2 is true. If level 2 is true, then level 3 is true. If level 4 is true, then that's true. And it's like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 leaps of logic, to the point where logic towers could have, like, it could be one tower that's intertwined to each other like a helix, basically, with 4 separate foundations and different true falses, and then they start to kind of go together and reach, and then it's like, okay, well, if that tower over there is true, then this tower is true, then my tower over here is true, and then my tower over there is true. And then because of that, then it just becomes this if this then that, if this then that, if this then that, if this and that, if this and that. The TE user comes by, so the logic user is like, hey, that's a really big tower up there. That's like a really big tower. Yeah, so where did you come up with all that? Oh, yeah. And this is one thing that I recommend the TE users doing to TI users. The TE user literally says, oh, your logic is flawless. Yes, your logic is perfect. Excellent thinking. This is amazing thinking. Oh, but your foundation is wrong. You may as well have just demolished the entire building, because that's like the TE user ripping out the foundation out from underneath the knowledge tower within the person, within the TI user. This is why TI heroes, out of all the types, are the most stubborn of all the types, because they cannot allow their personal knowledge tower inside of themselves to be broken. In fact, TI child is the next TI user that has the biggest problem. Wait a minute, I skipped TI parent. Why doesn't TI parent have this sort of problem? Because it's pessimistic. TI parent is pessimistic. It's willing to accept, hey, yeah, my logic could be wrong because I have the wrong input, and TE critic is demanding wisdom, demanding wise input. So then the TI parent's like, okay, I'm going to destroy my knowledge tower and start over again. I'll just do it again. Good to go. Of course, if you're in an ENTP, you combine that with SE Demon, then everything just kind of is like, okay, that's fine. I'll just wipe it fresh, clean slate, start a new knowledge tower. But when that happens, like especially in my life, when you look at my life and the point where my mentors absolutely ripped away every single one of my beliefs, they verified all of my beliefs, because they're like, oh, look at your little TE input foundation of all of that churchianity that you had. Oh, yeah, Chase pussy. He doesn't take the time to verify his own beliefs. He doesn't have critical thinking, right? A TI user who lacks critical thinking, because if they had critical thinking, they would allow other TE inputs. They would do more research, or they would ask other people, what do you think about this? Or they would read articles to make sure that their knowledge tower's foundation is actually a good foundation before they start going towards and processing their logos, their TI, to reach a conclusion. And because they're hoping that conclusion that they reach is the truth or a lie. Either way, they want to see if they're going to be able to come up with a true false judgment or decision at the end of the day. But if they have the wrong foundation, if they have the wrong TE that they're working or beginning their thinking upon, it doesn't mean a damn thing. This is the problem with TI users, okay? So a TI user needs to come along and it's like, hey, you need to cite your sources, or hey, where did you get that first initial premise? It's all about initial premise. What is the initial point? What's your starting point? That's the TE user's job. What's the starting point, right? I had my knowledge tower crash, and it was so painful, I didn't even know who I was, because to a TI user, their inner knowledge tower is literally the same as their identity, because they built their entire lives around it. Just like I built my entire life around being an INTJ, even though I'm not an INTJ. I even judge people from it. And imagine, since I'm a TI user, that means I have FE, imagine the amount of guilt. And TI Hero is extremely afraid of feeling guilt because FE inferior, so they're even more stubborn. Because they take it so hard that they could have been wrong. And they would rather not admit that they're wrong in most cases, Because if they admit that they're wrong, then that means they have to start over again. Because it's a lot of work and logos and thinking to crunch through every single little thing. Just like when I'm writing standard operating procedure documents for CSJ, and I realize that the entire process, the entire logical process that I developed for distributing content to you, the audience, just so when I get to that point, it's like, oh crap, what I have to completely redo this now because I have to think about it. And that knowledge tower has been destroyed, and it's been demolished. The foundation is bad. New foundation, new process. Do it again. This frustrates the hell out of TI users. This is where TI stubbornness comes from. As a TI user, it's where they get their stubbornness. This is why they're stubborn, because they're literally, using the wrong premise. Back to the Jenga example. When they're relying on the last known input, there is no new input coming in. They're not allowing any new input because they're either allowing what I call preferred input, that's the echo chamber, or they're allowing no new input, and then they're basing all their thinking based on last known input. Wrong. But what happens to their knowledge tower when it is last known input? That knowledge tower ends up cannibalizing itself. And that's where you end up having this Jenga game. TI as a knowledge tower within someone's soul becomes a game of Jenga because they're taking previous pieces from earlier, lower down in the tower, like we have on the very far side of the whiteboard here. We have our Tower of Babel library example. They're taking earlier pieces and putting it on the top. This is what's literally happening in a TI user's head who refuses to allow last known input, right? Both of these are examples of unhealthy TI users. Both of these examples lead to stubborn TI users. That's a problem. So what does a healthy version look like? What does a healthy TI version look like? A healthy TI version is someone who creates multiple towers. So look at it this way. Let's erase our board here so you can see where I'm coming from. Let's stop that and get this. Okay, let's erase the board here. Okay, let's look at the healthy version. We got ourselves some nice grass, grassy land. Yeah. Got some nice grassy land. Awesome. And then we're going to have a foundation. Right there. We have a small, tiny foundation here. Tinier one here. Really big one. Well, medium size here. Really big foundation here. Little bit here. Okay. Now what? Well, look at it this way. My drawing is terrible. Ugh, gross. Let's try to get this here. We go here. Awesome. All right. And then we got this. You ever hear the story of Jacob's ladder? Think about that. If you think about it, all of these knowledge towers within this TI user's soul, they're all ladders. This is a healthy version. Why? Because when you're looking at all of the TE foundations, this one could be a false premise. This could be a true premise. This could be a I have no idea premise. This could also be a new idea premise. This could be uh, the majority agrees, um, or only minorities agree, right? What's the point? The point is a healthy TI user has many knowledge towers inside of them where they are actually taking every possible TE input. It could be like, okay, what's the TE input? Oh, there's that opinion, there's that opinion, there's that opinion, there's that opinion. A healthy TI user is one where someone takes every single opinion and lays it out inside their soul and applies logos to each individual opinion simultaneously. Wait a minute, Chase, isn't that like kind of how what rational people do? Yes, rational people do something similar, except they make their decision based on majority rules. Teaching a healthy TI user, see, whereas a rational person could have potentially thousands of knowledge towers with TE, and they're all short towers with TE foundations in those, and they're really strong foundations, that TE user. But then like a TI user may, instead of having just one, they could have like maybe up to 50 at a time, whatever. You see the difference? The bandwidth has been increased over time as a user becomes more acquainted with TI such that they're able to use TE in their lower functions. Now this gets especially difficult if you have TI child because you lack TE almost entirely. But for TI parents and TI heroes, that's not the case. This is why TI child and TI inferior go out of their way to listen, and they have the fewest towers available, but they also, technically speaking, are the most likely to be incorrect. But they're also the more likely to have their logic to be flawless. But the logic of the high TI users may be more flawed, but they're more often correct. Think about that. That's because you have TE critic and TE nemesis or villain supporting the parent and the hero, right? There's a difference. It's a different TI culture within the heads of these people, okay? So a healthy TI user is someone who has multiple knowledge towers running multiple logos checks or multiple logos processes to determine if each individual input is true, false, and of its own right. That's the point. That's the point of a healthy TI user. But an unhealthy one is going to create that echo chamber and have preferred inputs. It's like what the Bible talks about, how people in the last days will gather themselves up teachers who will only teach them things they want to hear, what their itching ears want to hear. That's an echo chamber, okay? That was prophesied in Thessalonians. And nowadays, guess what? There's echo chambers everywhere. And then you have, beyond that, you have having a TI user preventing them from getting any new input whatsoever. It's funny how often you see TI heroes do that. TI heroes closing themselves off entirely from all input, and then their TI just cannibalizes itself. And then the end result of that is this maximum stubbornness, and no one wants to even be around them anymore, which just adds to even more of their social anxiety. Their fear, their social anxiety of them having to accept that they might be wrong, and then having to feel guilty that they misjudged people or misjudged a situation, and their inability to take responsibility for their action leads them to becoming more afraid, which makes them even more shut-ins, which means that they end up interacting with people even worse, and then they end up having less relationships, and then it leads to a path of self-destruction over time for that TI user. That's a problem, okay? But again, the healthy TI user doesn't do this. It looks at all of the potential TE inputs and tests them with logos before they reach their true-false conclusion. The higher the TE in the shadow, the more likely a TI user is to do this. Yet, funnily enough, the TI hero of them all is not necessarily, they can do it, but then they cannot do it pretty hard. So it's like extremes, going back and forth between extremes. TI parent, because it's more precise because it's a parent auxiliary function, it's more willing to accept, yeah, my logic is wrong. I'm going to start over again, which means they can have higher precision. This is why, in the long run, while the TI hero can outthink the TI parent, the TI parent is technically more accurate in the long run. Look at extroverted sensing parents, as we're talking about TI heroes. Look at extroverted sensing parent and extroverted intuition parent. They're technically more accurate than their own heroes, SE heroes and NE heroes. That means, it's funny, I have an NE hero on staff, and I ask him all the time, okay, well, what's your opinion on this? What do you see happening? Or I go to him and I was like, I need your NE parent on this. And guess what? He'll come up with things that I didn't even see with my NE hero. I'm like, thank God for NE parent. Folks, I just want you guys to understand something. The parent functions are so powerful and so useful that since they're the last function developed in the ego, it makes sense that they're the most important function to develop, especially in the ego, because that's where a person gains their sense of personal responsibility from, right? That's where they get it from, okay? So it goes on further. Remember, when it comes to TI, the responsible or the wise TI user is the one who tests against every premise. This means that the TI user would have to be willing, and I'm calling out ISFJs when I say this, I'm calling out INFJs when I say this, I'm calling out EFJs, ESFJs and ENFJs with this. They would have to be willing. Oh wait, it's all TI users. Every TI user would have to be willing to listen. Wait a minute, a TI user willing to listen? No, because usually TI users are trying to get everybody else to listen. Oh, wait a minute. So if a TI user is willing to listen to opinions, to TE that they don't already agree with, and then spend time testing out those opinions with their logos inside of themselves to verify if those opinions are still true or false to them, that means they're a healthy TI user. One more example. I want to use one more example before I've hammered this home, before I move on to the TE. One more example is this. A TI user, one more example is a TI user. Let's say someone comes up to you and you're a TI user and they say, you're a piece of shit, or you're a horrible person, right? And they list out the reasons why or whatever. The TI user, instead of like calling them out and like, oh, you're a hypocrite because of this, this, and this, and you don't know what you're talking about because of this, this, and this. No. A wise TI user would be like, well, wait a minute, he might be right. See, taking the TE input, the TE premise, the TE foundation, and build that TE foundation. This person called me an XYZ superlative name and gave these other reasons. I'm gonna build all these foundations for all those reasons and that label that he assigned to me, or her, and I'm gonna test with my logos to verify whether or not what this person is saying is true. And then the TI user self-verifies. Oh, that person might be right about me. Maybe I should listen. The TI user listens, verifies, oh, no, he's wrong. And then the TI user proceeds to criticize and destroy that person in a debate, and they lose, and then it's over. Or they've gotten rid of that person, or they door slam them, or whatever, right? Or the TI user realizes that person is correct because they're able to take criticism, and then they change. They realize they are wrong, and then they take responsibility for their actions, and then they move on. And they've changed immediately and will not repeat those mistakes again because they realize it's not true. Welcome to being a TI user. This kind of behavior frustrates TE users big time because the TE user's like, why won't you listen to me and at least take the time to verify for yourself whether or not my opinion is actually true? Wow. Right? That's how that works. Oh, but TE users are not off the hook. Time to erase the board again. Let's look at the TE user problem. So I'm going to end with the title of this particular conference. I'll end with it. So if anyone's trying to figure out what this conference is really about, it's about ignorance and where ignorance comes from. Ignorance. And why is ignorance ignorance? Ignorance for a TI user. Ignorance for a TE user. Okay. So we looked at ignorance for a TI user, and that is using something called preferred input. Or last known input. Okay. That's a source of ignorance for a TI user. Oh, and I thought TI users were supposed to be all about true, false, and all about the absolute truth. Yeah, guess what? TI users could still be ignorant, and this is how it is. If you're a TE user, you need to call out your TI user on these premises immediately. You need to figure out if they are going off of preferred input or if they're going off of last known input. And you could tell if you throw input at them and see if the TI user is going to take the time to verify your opinion or your input. If they do, you know they're healthy, and you should probably be in a friend with them or be in a relationship with them. Who knows? Because you know they're a good decision maker. They're not full of shit. But what's ignorance for TE users? Well, Occam's razor. Occam's razor is ignorance for TE users. I've probably just triggered a bunch of people right now, but let's talk about why. I'm going to pull up a window here, and I'm going to define Occam's razor. It's a philosophy, not a truth. It is a philosophy. Occam's razor is a philosophy. It's also a principle. Wait a minute. The dictionary, and I quote, Occam's razor, a noun, the principle attributed to William of Ockham, that in explaining a thing, no more assumptions should be made than are necessary. The principle is often invoked to defend reductionism or nominalism. Wait a minute. Occam's razor. Ignorance of TE users is attached to reductionism or nominalism. See, so for you TE users, I'm using the dictionary because you like your labels, right? You like your references, you know. Let's define reductionism. Reductionism, it's a derogatory noun. The practice of analyzing and describing a complex phenomenon in terms of phenomena that are held to represent a simpler or more functional level, especially when this is said to provide a sufficient explanation. It basically means is that if it's easily, if this phenomenon or if this thing that is happening is easily explained by this thing, then that is the most likely thing to be true. So that's what I'm going to believe, okay? So let's break that down a little bit. All you TE users, reductionism equals believing likelihoods. Oh, yeah, believing likelihoods. The thing is, though, likelihoods are not always true, right? And if you end up believing and taking the expedient route, not the meaningful route, if you take the expedient route, because all these things are expedient, expedience leads to ignorance, you know, or let's do it this way. expedience equals ignorance, but the meaningful equals wisdom. Oh, wait. Ooh, I should probably like spell that correctly. Wisdo, not wisdom. The meaningful is wisdom, folks. So doing the opposite of these things, right? So believing likelihoods. Reductionism, believing likelihoods. Ooh, and nominalism. Oh, I'm going to slam TE users for this. I love this part. Nominalism. It's a philosophy. Wait a minute, not a fact. These are philosophies, principles, not facts. Nominalism, and I quote, the doctrine that universal or general ideas are mere names without any corresponding reality, and that only particular objects exist, properties, numbers, and sets are thought of as merely features of the way of considering the things that exist. Important in medieval scholastic thought, nominalism is associated particularly with William of Ockham. So basically, nominalism is rejection of abstractions and possibilities, okay? Rejection of the abstract or what's possible. Let's logically look at the difference. Let's look at the other logical side in terms of what that means, which leads to this one here. Belief in what is generally acceptable or generally accepted ideas. Which means people wielding Occam's razor could end up believing in this. The world is flat. You know, when it comes to not having technology to verify whether or not the world is flat until Galileo proved it with a lunar eclipse or with a lunar eclipse where the shadow of the Earth is cast upon the moon, basically. That basically, you know, proves that the Earth is round, not flat, etc., right? The world is flat because it's the rejection of the abstraction or what is possible. In those days, it is possible that the world was not flat, but it was round. That's the reality. But nominalism is like the belief in what is generally acceptable because of the reduction or the rejection of the abstract or what is possible. TE users fall in this trap every single time. It's so annoying. And then the Logos TI users are like, are you going to verify those beliefs? It's crazy. Occam's razor is literally a crutch. Occam's razor is literally that thing that keeps TE users ignorant. In as much as an echo chamber keeps TI users ignorant, right? Because last known input, because of preferred input equals echo chamber, last known input, and then they just start creating, you know, their own, they get delusional. A TI user becomes delusional with using last known input. A great example of last known input, if you want to watch a movie about last known input and that line of thinking, literally watch A Beautiful Mind, where you see this TI hero, INTP, played by Russell Crowe. His name is John Nash, the father of game theory, of all people. His mind was literally working on last known input all the time when he was having his paranoid delusions for his schizophrenia, because his mind was going on last known input consistently. and not even considering external premises that would challenge his knowledge tower, because he became so arrogant with his knowledge tower. That last known input. So we talk about the result of the rejection. We talk about the result of nominalism being belief in what is generally acceptable. Last known input, guess what its result is? Arrogance, right? Arrogance. It's a lack of humility, because it's like, oh, my logic is flawless. I could not be wrong. Yeah, you're wrong. Your logic is flawless, sure, and your logos is perfect, sure. But your initial preconception, your initial premise, your initial foundation for your logical argument is false. So that means your entire logical knowledge tower that you created is also false. It's false. Ignorance for TI. Occam's razor. Ignorance for TE. Reductionism, nominalism, ignorance. You all are ignorant. If you have a TI or a TE, you are ignorant. What you have to do is become a healthier version. When people were made or designed, because again, I maintain intelligent design is the truth, not spontaneous mutation or evolution from spontaneous evolution. I maintain intelligent design is where mankind came from. And based on that belief, because it is a belief, right? It's actually a belief. Based on that principle or belief, based on that premise, right? You could kind of see how interesting it is how mankind, especially when it comes to thinking, is still ignorant, regardless if they're a TI user or a TE user. I've banged on pretty hard on my channel about TE users, right? I've banged on them super, super hard. Made them out to be like these people who are always ignorant and all their beliefs and whatnot. I'm not letting the TI users off the hook, don't worry, okay? Because preferred input, last known input, that's a problem, guys. Let's be honest, that's a problem, okay? So how do you solve these problems? Well, like I explained with ignorant TI is someone who is able to consider all of the opinions that even they initially disagree with and verify those with their logos process, their TI process, to determine if they might be true. It's almost as if allowing abstraction to interfere with the concrete. Because if you think about it from a yin and yang point of view, okay, the yin representing the chaos, the yang representing the firm, representing order. If the TI knowledge tower is erect and it is a symbol of order within a person's soul, you have to test its foundation with the yin, with the chaos, with the storm. Look at it this way. Jesus Christ himself talked about yin and yang. Do you know when he did? The parable of the man who builds his house upon the sand. Wait a minute. The foundation in the sand, the foundation in chaos, the yin. And Jesus talking about the man who built his house upon the rock, the yang. That's when Jesus spoke of yin and yang. It's there, folks. Like, that's where it exists, right? So when you have that being explained and talked about in that regard, you know, it's kind of like, oh, whoa, hold on, you know. So you have to be willing to subject the yang, to subject your house, to subject your knowledge tower to testing. And you have to allow it to be tested by external chaotic opinion or thoughts to make sure and verify not only your logic is flawless, but the foundation is not in the sand, but also on the rock. You got to check that foundation, TI users, or you will be ignorant. TE users, you have to be open to the fact that however you're trying to explain your beliefs or explain your thinking, your beliefs, your principles, that they are based on actually something that's true. If you just assume that, oh, well, that's unlikely to be true, so I'm not going to believe that, wow, you're lazy. You're intellectually dishonest and intellectually lazy. You are ignorant. Or if it's like, well, you know, belief in what is generally acceptable, wow, That's like, if you're believing something's generally acceptable, that's the yang in your mind, and you're not allowing it to subject itself to the yin, which is the abstract or what is possible. You're trying to keep it too close to the concrete. And both sides are trying to keep it concrete and pointing fingers at the other person saying, no, I'm more right than you are. That's not how discourse works, folks. There's a reason we were designed so that not every man is correct in of their own right. Mankind can only be correct together and verifying with each other and people around them, not all one man doing it by themselves, where you have some arrogant TI hero or TI child saying, and having a God complex, especially TI child, saying, I know exactly everything there is to know. Oh my gosh, it's like this EVE Online player, Socratic, I used to know. Absolutely horrible. It was horrible. Don't recommend it, okay? That's a problem, right? Remember, ignorance is not bliss, folks. Ignorance is expedience. If anyone tells you ignorance is bliss, they're either being ignorant TEs or ignorant TI. Not fun. Do what is meaningful, okay? TE users, get rid of Occam's razor and just ask questions and go to TI users, or do the verification and spend time logicking it out yourself and literally apply if this and that to each of your individual TE beliefs or principles or premise. And if you have a hard time doing that, like if you're a TE child, go to TI users and outsource that to them. TI users, you need to check your foundations. Go to TE users and outsource building of foundations to them, and then test whether or not those foundations are built in the sand or built on the rock. It's that simple. If you do these things, you'll be doing what is meaningful, not expedient, and you are on the path to wisdom and not ignorance. I promise you. So that concludes the CSJ conference, November 2019. I would like to open this opportunity for you folks to join us. Yeah, I would like to open this opportunity for you folks to join us in Q&A right now. So everyone has the ability to talk. So go ahead and turn off your microphones and go ahead and ask questions if you have anything about today's content for the Ruby conference. Raka, you got an opinion there you want to share? It's all good. You're probably thumbing around on your phone. Is it not allowing people to talk?
Oh, okay. Here we go. Can you hear me?
There we go. Yes, I can hear you.
All right. Yeah. It took me a second to figure out how to get this to work on my phone. You're absolutely correct. No, so I was wondering, when you have like concrete TI or TE users, in particular, like, okay, so you have an abstract TI user or a concrete TI user, and you have the opposite TE user. Is that TI user more likely to reject the TE foundation because it's not either in the world of the concrete like themselves or the world of the abstract like themselves?
Absolutely, yes. There is normalcy bias there, yes, on both sides. This is why you have intuitives claiming censor bias on other people. Does that make sense?
Gross, but yes, it does.
It really, this is literally where bias comes from. Because remember, it doesn't matter, okay, it does matter if you are a concrete or abstract type, yes, but take those and set that aside for a second. TI by itself, regardless of what type you're in, TE by itself, regardless of what type it has concrete or abstract, yang versus yin properties attached to it. And everyone is trying to assume or create the ultimate yang knowledge construct within themselves, be it based in TI or based in TE, and it was leading to this ignorance. But when you add on top of that the fact that they're an abstract type or a concrete type, beyond that, on the next level up, going up one level, zooming out just slightly, because we're in the weeds here, let's zoom out and look at the forest. That's the result of that is bias. It ends up becoming biased. And that's a problem. Does that better answer your question?
Yeah, it answers it perfectly. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you for asking that question. I'm glad you asked that. I wanted to have an opportunity to flesh that a little bit more. Any other questions, Rock, or anyone else? And don't forget, guys, this will be posted on Patreon for everyone to watch later. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, since nobody else has got anything at the moment. So for TE child, basically avoiding, especially like, okay, my type. Let's just get down to the nitty gritty here. Any TE and looking at likelihoods. So it essentially comes down to just making sure that I'm going to TI users as much as possible, spewing all of the information and saying, hey, do something with this, essentially.
Yes, exactly. You're outsourcing your TE beliefs, the verification of your TE beliefs to other TI users, but you can't do it to just one TI user. You need to do it to all of them. Now, the one TI user that you're going to get the most results out of are TI child and TI hero, because they're optimistic, because your TE child is optimistic, and they'll be able to keep up with your TE child. Whereas a TI parent is not always necessarily going to keep up, because either the child is wearing out the energy of the parent, or the parent has already arrived at the most precise conclusion, but the TE child is not willing to accept it as fact.
Right. And then I've also noticed that like TI parents and TI inferior get really burnt out by TE child for the simple fact that like, no, a lot of times I've noticed it just ends up being because it's more precise. It's just like, no, that's wrong. And then TE child's like, yes, but why? Like, please explain. And then it's this whole struggle with pessimistic TI I've noticed. But that's the nature of having optimistic TE. So it makes sense.
Yes. Fair enough. Thank you. Any additional questions, anyone? Marcelino, Vicky, Helen, anyone?
Hey, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. What's up, Marcelino?
Good, Chase. How are you?
Good. Glad you're here, man. Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, glad to be here. Yeah, I appreciate those questions from Raka too. Those helped me out. I had a question. You talked about how that TI hero, FE inferior, like they don't want to be wrong because then they feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
How do you like as a TE user, how do you like work around that without triggering their inferior function, if that's possible, or in a way that they'll actually listen to your opinion?
So in the context of an ISTP, luckily, thank God they have NE Trickster, where they walk around with anything is possible. So as an ENFP, you could go to that TI hero and just be like, yo, you do accept that it's at least possible that your thinking might be incorrect here, right? Well, yeah, anything is possible. And then you start inserting the new premise, the new foundation for them there, for them to process. And hopefully they'll listen to you from that vector. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Now for a INTP, very different. They're already abstract and are willing to go for the abstraction. But if you're making a concrete argument as an ENFP, they're not willing to accept that as much because they have SE Trickster. So you would have to bring an SE user with you to demonstrate to the INTP on your behalf in order to get them to think. Because the INTP needs a demonstration and experience it for themselves to be willing to consider the concrete argument.
Okay. And sort of a follow-up question, if you don't mind.
Sure, go for it.
Regarding TI users and how they can go off of like last known input or preferred input, how do you, I guess, combat that if there's no way for them to go back to that input source and verify anything?
So last known input, you basically provide them additional input that conflicts directly with their either preferred input or last known input. Now, if you're dealing with a preferred input situation where you're dealing with a culture, you have to have multiple people that they respect who are outside of their culture provide opinions to that TI user to show them that that culture or their preferred input is not correct, but it has to be from people they respect.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you.
Of course, this all applies to social engineering, but again, ignorance to wisdom, right?
Right.
Cool. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I think that's good then. Let's, oh, hold on. Might have gotten a message. Oh, someone telling me they couldn't ask questions because they're working. Awesome. Okay. I guess that concludes it for this conference this month. Thank you all for coming. I should hope to have this posted in its entirety on the Patreon very soon. Thank you all for coming. I'm glad you're here. It's been great. And let me know if there's anything else I could do for you guys. Thank you for being my patrons, and thank you all who are not here with us now and will be watching this video later. Thank you all for all of your financial support. We really appreciate it, and things are changing, and hopefully we can get that stuff out for you all very soon. So with that being said, folks, have a good night, and I'll see you guys next month for the Ruby conference in December. So see y'all later.